This does seem like a seminal moment in American history, doesn't it? One that could change the course of race relations forever in this country. But the sad truth is, we have been here before, and each time the promise of lasting change has been a false promise. There were riots in Los Angeles in 1992 when the 4 police officers caught on video beating Rodney King were acquitted. In 2013, there were protests across the country when 17-year-old Trayvon Martin was shot and killed by wannabe cop George Zimmerman, and then again when he was found not guilty. 2014 in Ferguson, Missouri, after Michael Brown, an unarmed black man, was killed by police, and then again when they were acquitted. Again in 2014, when a video shows Eric Garner, who was selling cigarettes on the street, dies after a New York police officer applies a chokehold, and then again when the officer is acquitted. Every time, in each of those cases, the deaths and the acquittals that followed were seen as seminal moments that could change the trajectory of race relations in this country. But in each of those moments, that promise quickly disappeared, with the next story in the news cycle stealing the national spotlight. And here we are again, with the same hope and stubborn belief that this time is going to be different. And maybe it will. There certainly are some facts this time that would make one believe maybe it really will be different. The video of a Minneapolis police officer keeping his knee on Floyd's neck until he passes out and finally dies leaves no room for dissenting opinion from the ugly and obvious truth. After that video, the country was unified in horror. And protest across the country included black and white, young and old, rich and poor, that is, until the protests were hijacked by looters and arsonists. And then something miraculous happened. The peaceful protests continued after the rioting stopped. And that unity that we thought we had lost was on display for all to see. So will this time be different? I certainly hope so, but I still have my doubts. Our short attention span news cycle will move on to the next story, a national disaster, a national outrage, a political scandal, and then our interest will wane. And the very fact that we are nearing the home stretch of an election year that will decide not only the White House, but the Senate and the House of Representatives makes it even more difficult, because neither side is going to want to work together, give each other credit, or compromise. So it's up to you, it's up to us to keep the conversation alive. But for meaningful change to take root, the conversation has to be rational. But if your opening salvo is to defund the police, real reform will be lost in the division that such an absurd idea creates. You just can't bully your way to reform like protesters in Minneapolis tried to do when Mayor Jacob Fry refused to say that he would defund the police department. But clearly, the weak solutions of the past will not work either. National anger will not be pacified simply by police sensitivity training. Police need to understand that to truly serve and protect citizens, they need to expose and get rid of bad cops, the ones who give them all a bad name. The blue code of silence is simply not consistent with the oath you took. As George Floyd was being killed, pleading for his life, there were 3 other officers who stood by and did nothing. It was a jarring and horrifying example of the kind of looking the other way that happens in police departments across the country. The Minneapolis police officer who had his knee on George Floyd's neck, Derek Chauvin, had 18 complaints filed against him in 18 years. That certainly should have raised a red flag. But for real reform to take place, police unions need to be on board and stop protecting police officers who should not be on the force. And there is much more that needs to happen. Police departments should look like the community they police. It's even better if the officers are from the neighborhood. Newark, the largest city in New Jersey, was decimated by riots in 1967 after the assassination of Martin Luther King. But this year, nothing but peaceful protests, led by the mayor, Ras Baraka. The mayor says that making certain police know the community, live in the community, or are active in the community makes all the difference.
Those people out there are your neighbors, your relatives, your friends, and when you begin looking at those people that way, then you respond to them differently.
Mayor Baraka sums it up by saying when you know somebody's mama or grandma by name, you automatically treat them differently. And finally, it's important for us to understand that most of us have no idea what it's like to be black in America because we're not. And politicians who have to be part of the solution love to talk. Here's a suggestion. Maybe it's time to listen. Just listen. Actually, that's good advice for all of us. I'm Larry Mendte. We'll talk again soon.